Well, let's move on with today's show. I'm absolutely delighted to say that Georgie Frost, the Times Money Mentors editor-at-large, joins me this morning. Good morning.
Very good morning to you.
Well, lovely to see you. It's funny, isn't it? That came out of the blue about Howard, and I just think you realise life is very short, very precious, isn't it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And when you said Howard from the Chris Tarrant early breakfast days, it takes me back to being on the school bus.
Well, that's right, absolutely right. And of course, that reminds me of course, Howard with Chris and Capital Radio and all the rest of it. And it is, you know, thanks to people like him, and radio came alive, and he was one of the great gods of radio, I think. Let's just move on and talk about some other things as well, because it is interesting. There's a great story about social media and the fact that I think a lot of young people don't immerse themselves in life because they're too busy immersing themselves in social media. There's a great story about how Twitter, I know you've come off Twitter or X, people are moving to Blue Sky. I would suggest that actually maybe people need to live in the moment.
Yeah, quite. I didn't make a big public announcement like a lot of other people seem to be making.
Shouldn't I have said anything?
No, I have no problem.
Like The Guardian.
Yeah,
right, I'm off.
Everyone who's leaving X or Twitter seems to be making some grand gesture about it. I just got a little bit fed up with it. It was just, I mean, it is toxic. And you say young people spending all their time on social media, honestly.
That's me.
Well, in that case, yes, incredibly young people are spending all of their time. I think all of us, and I sound like a real, old Luddite now when I say this, but I really do. I hear people say this all the time. Oh, there are some good things to social media. And the older I get, the more I struggle to think what those good things really are.
Well, I think it depends on the platform, doesn't it? Facebook, I think, is quite useful to stay in contact with school friends, for example.
Who does? All you're doing is you're just looking at what they're doing with their lives.
No, so
now.
we've just used it to organise a meeting. By the way, I'm looking forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks. I'm seeing all my school friends who I've known since I was 13.
All right, then, that's wonderful.
So that's kind of nice. But what is interesting about this, as you say, The Guardian stomped off, took its toys and walked off the playing field, and also the Clifton Suspension Bridge has also left.
Oh.
It had its own...
So you said The Guardian stomped off the Clifton Suspension Bridge. I was thinking, that's a weird...
But apparently millions have joined Blue Sky, which has a stronger focus on moderation, set up by the Twitter founder Jack Dorsey. 1 million people joined the platform in one day. Now, I think that is a slightly weird statistic because I saw it had appeared and then I joined because I wanted to get my URL, my domain, my name, before anyone else nicked it. It doesn't mean I'm on it.
Right, got it. I mean, have you taken a look round?
No, I haven't, no. But, I mean, it's just quite interesting, isn't it? Because we had Facebook, Twitter, then Threads, which I joined. Of course, I've never been on there either.
No.
Now Blue Sky. And also, aren't you just seeing it all being diluted? You're on multiple platforms, so therefore the reach is lower, so therefore what's the point?
I don't know. I look at this. This Blue Sky sort of come out of a bit of nowhere. I know it's been, yeah, exactly. I know it's been around for a while, but yes, I remember when people were very sort of animated about X, especially when Elon Musk arrived, or Twitter as it was at the time, and then people were talking about moving over to Threads, which is part of the sort of Facebook Meta family. Yeah. And let's be honest, they're all just big tech in another name. You know, is it that
Control
much better?
Of data.
Well, quite. So loads of people moved over to Threads. I don't know anyone that uses it. It keeps pushing it at me on Instagram. I just like Instagram. I can look at dog videos and melting cheese, you know, videos, which I quite like. But, you know, the rest of it...
Melting cheese videos?
Yeah, there's a big thing about
that,
yeah. And melting chocolate as well. There's something about it. But apart from that, I just think... But until we have a big migration away from X, I still think it will be the dominant platform.
Well, apparently X doesn't have a particularly large population base compared to the likes of Instagram, TikTok and Facebook, so all the kids are on TikTok.
Oh.
My nephews and nieces love TikTok.
It's too frenetic.
I agree.
Yeah.
But you get caught in the doom loop. So you see one and then you scroll and there's another and
which
you
means
keep
the
going.
Algorithms are doing their job very well, because it's the same with YouTube, and that's why you go down a YouTube black hole, because the idea is that they're trying to cook you in to keep watching, and they do it really well.
Well, they do a great job. And actually, apparently, a lot of the migrants to Blue Sky from X are left-wing, which means that X is becoming more right-wing and it becomes an echo chamber.
Yeah.
It's just quite interesting, that. And, of course, National Unfriend Day. So, do you have Facebook?
Do you know what? I do have Facebook. I probably look at it, but maybe once a month.
Do you have people on there you don't know?
Probably not. No, I'm a bit more fussy about that, and I'm under a slightly different name. But I like the concept of unfriending, and I don't just mean... Sorry.
I'll leave.
That makes me seem really antisocial. But you know what I mean? You know there's people in your life and you think, do you add to my life? Or are you bringing me down? There's always someone...
Mood-tubers.
And you know, yeah, exactly. And I don't just necessarily mean sort of social media, I mean in real life. You know, is this person making me feel good about myself? And I think sometimes it's good just to walk away from that, sort of decouple from your friendships.
You're
some
hard.
of them.
You're ruthless.
Yeah.
I like it.
I probably wouldn't say anything, I'd just ghost them between you and I.
Just disappear.
Yeah, exactly. I mean...
shall we talk about disappearing, actually? It's quite a good segue into this morning's papers. This is the front page of the Sunday Times. Labour plans Maloney-style migrant deals. Look, this is a huge electoral issue. We know that Starmer says he's going to smash the gangs. Well, guess what, Keir Starmer? We're actually seeing more illegal migrants coming here this year than last year. And the big headline is that ministers are preparing to strike several Italy-style deals with several countries to stop thousands of illegal migrants setting off on the perilous journey to Britain. Essentially, what he's trying to do is to copy Giorgia Meloni, to say, look, we're going to throw tons of cash at all of these countries which are unstable, so therefore it stops the migrants leaving there in the first place, so therefore we don't have to sort it out on this side of the channel. I mean, also, his pairing with Meloni is strange anyway. They're not exactly political bedfellows.
No, quite. But I think what he's looking at is the statistics. And actually, if you look at the number of illegal migrants that come to Italy, it is huge. Of course. Hugely more than here. So they've managed to reduce...
But that's because of geographical factors.
100%. But they've managed to reduce it through their methods of paying for border force, stiffening up border forces in different countries, etc. And they've reduced it by, I think it's over 60%.
Yeah, 64% according to the EU's border force Frontex.
Which I don't think, look...
That's amazing.
I don't think... I mean, I can see the arguments in some countries, obviously, because a lot of people are getting sent back to detention centres, those people who are legitimately should be... have ability to seek asylum. I think, you know, paths need to be found for these people. But yes, I think... The worrying figure for people sort of making that argument about coming over for illegal migration is about 50 people, I think 45 last time I checked, died making these crossings. They are unbelievably perilous. It lines the pockets of some of the most nefarious criminals around the world. And I think it's absolutely right that we need to start looking at ways in which, you know, innocents are protected.
I agree. And of course, those people, many of them are so desperate, they will get into those very crowded boats, of course. And you're right, it's the people who are running the boats, the gangs, that need to be imprisoned. And we know that the authorities are trying to do that. But I just wonder whether Keir Starmer really understood what he was taking on here. If you remember, he set up the Border Security Command. Well, this morning, many people involved in that say they don't even know what that does. And these are the people involved in it. They don't understand the remit. They don't understand how that's going to work. And of course, one of the other things that I'm thinking about here is Labour was so quick, wasn't it, to stop Rwanda, to stop the RAF, Wethersfield or Scampton and all the rest of it. But they didn't really have a plan in place.
Oh, it's very easy to be in opposition, isn't it? And have all these ideas and criticise, and then when you're in power and you have all of these competing things that they need to deal with, it's, you know, it's just very difficult.
It is very difficult indeed. Also, the front page of the Sunday Times this morning, there are pictures of tractors, of course. This is farmers protesting outside the Welsh Labour conference in Llandudno and Conway yesterday to demand a meeting with Sir Keir Starmer. He didn't actually even meet them. He scuttled out of the back door and he was called a rat by many of the farmers. We'll talk more about that later on. Should we also talk about the Sunday Telegraph as well? This is based on the Alison Pearson story that we've been talking about, the police having very strange priorities. I too had a visit from the police over a tweet, says Julie Blindell, who is a writer. I mean, a
prominent feminist writer, yeah.
Prominent feminist writer. She said she was essentially, someone complained about a tweet she had composed. The police turned up at her door. She said she was not allowed to know which tweet had prompted the investigation, under what category of hate crime it was being investigated. She wasn't allowed to know who had complained, even though it came from the Netherlands, apparently. So she's not allowed to know anything. The police said, right, would you like to come down to the station and make a statement? And she said, no.
You're absolutely right. And by all accounts, I think it was dropped, and I don't think there is actually records of this. I think there's, you know, on the police records, as it were, which is probably quite right, because there is no crime here. I'm really quite disturbed about these, and I know you've spoken about this a lot on your show, but why are police, please someone explain to me, why are police investigating non-crimes? It's even in the title. Now, I understand they say it's related to a pattern of behaviour that could one day eventually lead to a crime. That's the argument. And yet, if you read on the BBC, one of the journalists spoke about a horrible incident of a man who called up and made horrible things on the phone to her. It took 2 years of her trying to get this person prosecuted for what they were doing on the phone. And what she said was it was raising issues related to the Sarah Everard and the person who sadly killed and murdered her. Were so many incidents that had led up to that. Well, why don't you look at those incidents? Why don't you stop going round to women in their 40s or 50s, middle-class women, journalists, writers, and what they say, and actually focus on the real crimes that are happening?
100%.
It is... The biggest problem with this is I think we already are losing a lot of faith in our policing. This only compounds it further. Now, I have a huge amount of sympathy for the police, because if you look at these non-crime hate incidents, the guidance around it is very convoluted. Like, it's unbelievable, and that's why you're seeing such discrepancies across the UK with the forces. But again, I go back to why on earth are you going round to sort of middle-class journalists' home and not investigating proper crimes?
Exactly.
What is it? And not explaining to people what they are being...
Well, and policing free speech, ultimately free speech. And this brings me nicely to the question today as well, because also there's another big story today in the Express. Up to 1 million poor pensioners will miss out on vital help with winter fuel bills, freezing weather. This, of course, is due to the winter fuel allowance, which is being scrapped. You have to then fill in a form. Apparently it's 28 pages long. Many elderly people can't actually do that. And so that brings me nicely, given the government has got all of these problems, and I think actually the honeymoon, as I said, is well and truly over, what is worrying you the most? It doesn't have to be political. Are you worried, for example, about the cost of a mortgage? Of course, we've got Georgie here. Are you worried about the lack of infrastructure in this country? Also, the nationalisation of the rail, by the way. I heard how much it's going to cost. The fact is it's not ill thought through. The whole thing is ill thought through. What worries you the most at the moment? Good morning, 6:22, Sunday, November the 17th. I'm David Ball, joined by the gorgeous Georgie Frost this morning, the Times Money Mentors editor-at-large. Lots of messages already coming in. Good morning, Sharon Miller. Good morning to you, one of our regulars. Sharon says, what is worrying me the most is that I am a waspie. The government stole my state pension from me, hence I have to be working. Yet they've all this money, it seems, to dish out to other countries to help refugees and asylum seekers. How about giving us our money that we work so damn hard for and we are entitled to? That's Sharon in Staffordshire. And she goes on to say the government just keeps them giving money away. It gives money away to people and it doesn't look after people in this country. I'm paraphrasing for you, Sharon, but it's a really good point.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic towards the waspie women. It was all about equalisation of pensions, which I don't think anyone disagrees with, but the amount of time that some women were given just wasn't sufficient. I mean, you know, you have to think about your future here. This takes years of planning, and some people had to then think, OK, I've got another how many years of working which I hadn't factored in for. So huge amount of sympathy for that. But that fell under the last government.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it does feel the government is fighting on multiple fronts. I'm not sure the government, I think it's fair to say, isn't actually dealing with this terribly well. And that brings me to the question this morning. What is worrying you the most? It can be anything. It doesn't have to be political. It might be actually affording your mortgage, for example. And what we're seeing is even though inflation is coming down, interest rates are going up. I'm going to talk to you about that a little later on as well. And, of course, that breeds insecurity. Those people coming off fixed-rate mortgages as well.
Yes, finance is a big thing. It's actually a really great question, because if you read all the newspapers, a lot of this is, yes, it's about freedom of speech, and these things are really vitally important. But actually, what is it that really matters? And I've been thinking about this. I think for me, as a woman in her 40s who's a freelancer, it is availability of jobs. It's what next? And I think in this sort of environment, especially working in the media, but that, I think, is quite concerning, especially when we have a government that I don't think really gets business. when you're talking about increasing national insurance and all that on businesses, are they going to be employing the likes of me as much? Are they going to be cutting back? Technology, all of those sorts of things. I do think, just thinking, where am I going to be in the next year in terms of work and finances? And I think a lot of people will be in that position.
I think that's right. People actually thinking, how am I going to afford to put food on the table? How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to do X, Y and Z? Let's go through this morning's front pages now, if you are just waking up. The front page of the Sunday Times. A couple of articles. We've spoken about this one, Labour plans Maloney-style migrant deals, because obviously Keir Starmer has a huge problem. 33,000 illegal migrants have come to this country, despite the fact that he says he's going to smash the gangs. He's cozying up with Georgia Maloney. The question is whether he can actually do anything to turn the tide of the numbers of illegal migrants coming to this country. This is a very interesting headline as well on the Sunday Times. Sunak ignored top advisor's blunt memo warning against an early election. This is Rishi Sunak's campaign director, urged him not to call an early election, saying that he would not be able to throw punches with both fists. This is Isaac Levido. He said to Sunak in April, do not call an election. You must wait. And he ignored him.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting article. I was reading it last night. It's quite long, and it sort of talks about perhaps some of the mistakes that Rishi Sunak made. Let's make no bones about it. He would not have won any time he called the election. I cannot.
Do you not think so? No. I think if the economy had improved and people felt better about themselves, or you think it was tired and out of date?
So this is where I go back to what we were saying about people were concerned about money. Yes, inflation is back to around target. It's at a reasonable level. Prices haven't come down.
No, not at all.
I mean, we're still feeling it in our pockets. We're still about to head into a very cold winter. Energy bills are going up. Mortgage, a lot of people coming off, as you said, fixed-rate mortgages on much higher rates. You know, even though it looks OK, you know, if you look at the statistics, people aren't feeling that.
No. What is also interesting, according to this, if Tory plotters had forced a vote of no confidence in Sunak, he would have won. I don't believe that.
Yeah, I do.
I just don't believe it.
No.
Anyway, that's the front page. Sorry, that's the front page.
It's a really good article, then. I do recommend reading it. But yes, I think, you know, this is where all the dirty laundry comes out,
isn't it? Just,
people weren't listening to me, but I'll be totally honest with you.
Great reading for a Sunday.
Yes. Yeah. Had we gone to the polls perhaps now, post a couple of few months with Labour, and I think that's...
100%. I think you get a very different result.
I think it's slightly different.
And also, there's a great picture, Farmers versus Starmer. I saw a very rude T-shirt as well, which I can't show because it's a very clever play on words. Essentially, voicing the farmers' disquiet with the Prime Minister. And it says Labour war on countryside on the tractors. And, of course, we've got the march that is taking place on Tuesday. We'll talk more about that later on as well. The Sunday Telegraph this morning, we were talking about this as well this morning. I, too, had a visit from the police over tweet, says writer. This is Julie Bindel. Of course, we were talking about that. Police should really be allowed to concentrate on crime instead of hurty tweets, which people put out, I think.
Head to the streets, not the tweets. Or
well said, well said.
I don't think it wasn't mine.
Oh, well, it was still very good. There's another column here, NHS alert over rise in strokes in middle age. The NHS has raised the alarm over a shocking rise in strokes. These are in men and women in their 50s. They are rising faster than any age group, with a 55% increase in 20 years. And, of course, this is linked to sedentary lifestyle, poor diet, all the rest of it. People are not looking after themselves.
Well, what is the preventative for strokes? My mum recently had one.
Yeah.
A very minor one. She's not in her 50s. But she is very healthy. She's a size 8. She's very slim, active woman. So what can you do? I suppose some people must have a genetic predisposition.
Well, for sure, but actually what this points to is the fact that many people are sedentary, they don't eat the right food, and of course we know that. You see people with their big tummies, and of course that centripetal obesity is really bad in terms of cardiovascular wellness.
They say that's a better measure, isn't it? Your stomach waist size than BMI, for example.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
OK, so basically we've got to all get up.
And do something.
So come on, it's 6:30 now, everybody.
It's so cold that actually I'm very happy to sit there on a sofa and eat chocolate, which obviously is the wrong message. Don't do that. Don't do that at all. And we'll talk about this later in the week as well. Assisted dying legislation is a step towards non-voluntary euthanasia. This is really complicated. I've just written a piece for a national newspaper which will go out next week. I'm in favour of the legislation. Lots of doctors are against the legislation, and I think this is a matter of personal choice.
I'm going to do the worst thing that
sit on the fence.
Honestly, this for me is so difficult. Because I can see the arguments on both sides. What I would hate, and I imagine there's, you know, we know this with older people generally anyway. I know that if my mother or father ever thought that they were a burden to us, they would want to do something. And this is what frightens me the most, is people feel that they're a burden.
But remember, the legislation is drafted and it is very careful in the word. 2 doctors, you've got to have less than 6 months to live. First of all, then you have to have 2 doctors, then you have a review, then you go to a judge. So at the moment, the legislation and the framework is very tight. The worry and what they're saying is that it's an easy, slippery slope from there to broaden the criteria.
This is my point. And I've got a very bad analogy that I'm going to use, actually. But, you know, it is, once you've kind of gone one step forward, it's very hard to, ever go back. It is just, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to happen, but the hardest part is making that initial move that says we are going to legalise this. Once you've done that, then every little step afterwards is a little bit easier.
But I've been there when patients are imploring me to end their pain, when they're doubly incontinent, when they've got vascular dementia, all the rest of it. Well, actually, that wouldn't count under the criteria. But then also, as Esther Ranson says, why should she have to go to Dignitas to be removed from her family, to sit in a clinical room where she is frightened, away from everyone that she loves? I was taught many years ago, we prepare for a great birth. Why don't we have a great death?
I could not agree with you more. The emphasis in this country, and I believe around the world, is that longevity rather than quality. And we do need to have discussions about how to have a good death. But I don't think legalising something like this immediately, and maybe I'm talking myself down here to having actually opinion on it, but I just think...
What do you mean immediately? We've been talking about it for years.
This, to me, well, before we've even had a conversation about what is the best way to have a good death, really, should we be focusing on trying to elongate our lives for as long as possible, or should we just start having a conversation about actually its quality of life? That's just, again, I sit on the... And I know, I've been there, both grandparents of mine recently, deathbeds, but I don't want to make that decision for them. And it is awful to be in that position. But, you know, again, this is why we have things like rule of law and due process, because it is for you who's been in that situation and seen the suffering. Of course you have an opinion on it because you want to help them. You are a helper, you're a doctor. But that's why it needs to be taken away, and that's why you have the independent judge.
Yeah.
And it should always have that. I agree with you, this debate has been going on for a long time. There's been a lot of very famous cases that have gone to court to try and make this happen. But I just think we also need to have another debate around it that's talking about, like I said, having a good death.
Yeah. I think we agree, actually.
Probably. I think
we do. I think you've talked yourself around to a position on it.
I've argued both.
You have actually argued both. Georgie, thanks ever so much for the moment. We'll take a break. After the break, we'll go through the rest of this morning's front pages. Good morning. 6:35. Dr. Dave. I'm Dr. Dave now. I used to be Dr. Dave many years ago. Kevin in Barnstable, good morning to you. I think Georgia is wrong about Sunak. If Sunak had taken the strong steps and stopped the boats by picking them up and taking them back, as stated by Richard Tice, he would have done significantly better. Sunak was a fool.
I'm not saying that there's lots of things he could have done that then would have eventually led to him
But calling
winning.
that election early was a mistake.
But I don't think, whatever he would have done, I don't think he would have got that through. I don't think it would have made a significant difference.
But no one understood why he called the election. The only thing I could think of was he was about to be deposed through letters of no confidence. But allegedly that is not true.
I can't answer why he went against advice and why he thought it was a good idea. Maybe because it's the summer and people are more buoyant. Honestly, I don't know.
I don't think anyone
But what I do
knows.
think there's obviously actions that he could have taken that I think might have made a difference eventually. But I do think after 14 years, people had had enough, quite simply.
I think that is absolutely true. Let's go through the rest of this morning's front pages. The Sunday Express this morning, OAPs will die as the big freeze hits. This is up to 1 million poor pensioners will miss out on vital help with winter fuel bills. As freezing weather sweeps into Britain, ministers were branded cruel last night after refusing to extend the deadline for pension credit applications. Many people are struggling. I said to Georgie earlier that the form is 24 pages long, 243 questions. What an absolutely ridiculous thing to do. And of course, you've got older people trying to fill this in, very confused about the whole thing, as anyone would be if you've got 24 pages. And meanwhile, you've got a hard, callous government saying, no, you can't have any money and you're going to freeze to death. It's a terrible look.
It is. We have a problem with pension credit anyway. There's hundreds of thousands of people who are eligible that don't want to claim it. Now, that could be because they have to go through rigmarole to do it. It could also be pride. They don't feel that they need to, but it is a gateway benefit that can lead to all sorts of, free prescriptions, those sorts of things. So it is really worth doing. And obviously now, with the winter fuel payment, it really is worth doing. But for Labour to come out and say, oh, it's increased 163%, just sounds callous.
It does.
You should be going round to their houses almost and making sure that they are filling out. All I will do, and I will say this and repeat it over and over again, if there is someone that you know in your family that you think is eligible, please, please do help them.
Yeah, brilliant.
Because this is a really, really good benefit pension credit to have, and it is going to be a very cold winter, and we already know, as you know, winter deaths increase anyway, and I do worry that, that is a help for people and it's being taken away. So,
but already I've heard from people who are saying they're in one room, they have an electric fire on, they don't want to turn the heating on. I mean, this is already... We're not even in winter. The front page of the Daily Mail, call that net zero. I mean, here we go again. If you're not worried about the pension, the winter fuel allowance, or you're not worried about the levels of immigration into this country or whatever else, this is the front page headline, call that net zero, Keir Starmer. This is Keir Starmer being accused of hypocrisy after it was revealed the UK, wait for this, sent to COP29, which you know a lot about. COP29. Guess how many people we sent? 470 people were sent to the UN Climate Change Summit in Azerbaijan. This is just extraordinary. And of course, many world leaders weren't there. Biden wasn't there. President Xi of China wasn't there. The British delegation is bigger than that sent by the US and major other European economies. I mean, the whole thing is nuts. But you said it's the most surreal event.
I've been for a couple of years now reporting from COP. Let's first talk about the air miles, right? Yeah. So there's a story just underneath all this. So Green Ed's 23,000 air miles. There were 65 private jets to the COP conference, right? I don't really have a problem with that because I actually think, having been there, and anybody knows that if you want to do deals, and I don't mean oil and gas deals, which I'll get into in a second. But if you want to do deals, you need to look in the whites of people's eyes. This I agree with. Everybody who's done any business knows that Zoom cannot even come close. So I've got no issue with people flying about to do deals that if the deals are good deals, and I make no judgment on that. The worrying thing about COP, I think, is that, especially in Azerbaijan, we've gone from Sharm, we've gone then to Dubai, now Azerbaijan, oil and gas producing countries. At the start of
Great irony in that.
Azerbaijan's president declared fossil fuels are a gift from God.
Yep.
The country's deputy energy minister was secretly filmed promoting oil and gas deals on the sideline. And last week, the former UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon said that the COP process was no longer fit for purpose. It feels, and again, I don't have a problem with oil and gas companies being there because they need to be on the table. If you want and you believe in getting to net zero or any kind of climate action, then we need a bridge. And oil and gas, you cannot just, you cannot just...
Even though Labour doesn't believe in that, of course, Ed thinks we can just turn it off.
Well, and let's get into that as well. So, and actually, in one of the newspapers, it talks about the boiler tax, and Ed Miliband is pulling back on this. This was the fact that companies that don't produce as many target of heat pumps will be taxed. And where's that going to go? It's going to go on consumers. People don't want heat pumps. They're expensive to implement. The technology, a lot of this, as you and I have spoken about in the past, is sort of beta technology. There may be better things coming beyond those targets than the 2030, 2035. But by making us fast track now, you are basically throwing money after money on things that are not necessarily proven. And I'm not arguing whether we need to do this or not at all. This is, that is for the people who have the maths and the statistics and all that sort of thing to decide. What I worry about is, are we impoverishing ourselves, our consumers, our people, and are we removing ourselves as a result from a table of influence? Keir Starmer talks about wanting to be a leader in the climate debate. Well, to be a leader, people need to follow you. And,
no one's there.
No one is there. No one is following. No one is treating this COP process. If you give it to Azerbaijan, again, there's another story. PM's COP29 visit fuels Azerbaijani abuses. Talking about emboldening the repressive regime, this is in the Telegraph, in Azerbaijan with his attendance at COP29 climate summit. Where are we putting these?
But also, when you look at the United States, of course, Trump has just appointed Chris Wright as Energy Secretary. Of course, he is a big figure in the oil and gas industry. So here we are, 1% of global emissions in this country, and yet the United States, and Trump has been very forthright about this, saying, I will back fracking. So none of this makes any sense. I do have to move on. And actually, that brings me nicely to the question, given that we have talked about a number of things already this morning, what is worrying you the most? Let me know your thoughts on that, please. 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. You can get in touch by text. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Front page of The Observer now. Fears grow over children at risk placed in illegal care homes. A shocking increase in the number of vulnerable children deprived of their liberty by the state is leaving more youngsters in illegal accommodation. Apparently, this is absolutely shocking. At least 1,000 of Britain's most vulnerable children are now being subjected to deprivation of liberty orders, with the number of applications for their use more than doubling between 2021 and last year. There are cases here of a young woman who was physically sat on for an entire day by staff trying to restrain her, a disabled child whose feeding tubes had been nibbled by rats, others found in bedsits guarded by security guards or in Airbnbs and caravans. That's the big story in The Observer. The front page of the Mirror this morning, £1 billion boost for buses. There is a strap at the top, Colleen exclusive. I'm moving on from Wagatha Christie. Just call me Colleen from Liverpool. I have no interest at all. And The Sun, Wagatha, call me Colleen, no interest at all. I really don't. I don't care.
I know.
Do you care?
About the jungle and Wagatha Christie? Yeah. I mean, I found that quite an interesting case.
Yes.
You know, just for legal perspective.
I don't want to go over it again.
But in terms of the jungle, I couldn't even remember what it was called then. I'm a celebrity gamer, sorry. That's why I called it the jungle.
But also, I did this yesterday, and I said, I don't know who half of them are. I know Barry McGuigan's in there as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest, it's not really something. But you know what? If it's
your thing,
diverting TV and you like it, well, you crack on. For me, it's taking up too many newspaper columns.
Also, this is a big story. Many people take their phone to the loo.
Yes, it's called loo surfing or something.
Yes,
like
loo
that,
surfing. So you sit there for hours on your phone scrolling through Twitter or Instagram or Blue Sky or whatever you're doing. And apparently, doctors identify a nasty new condition caused by our mobile phones. Yes, that's right. Social media addicts who take their smartphones for long sessions on the loo are being struck down by painful piles. That's right. It's been called bog bum.
Can I just say, this is not people, this is men.
Oh, sexist. Why? What?
Women do not spend hours on the toilet. Please, ladies, get in contact. Let me know. What do your boys do in the toilets? Because, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail here because, you know, people are having their breakfast. But, you know, what do men do in the toilet for hours, apart from now, as I know, looking at their phone?
It's a really important space you can lock yourself away from women.
One tip, though, am I right in thinking this, is to have a small stool.
Yes.
Where you put your feet on to raise
for
your
anatomical
legs.
positioning.
Yeah, I thought I'd get back to the medical...
Well, that's right, because in India, for example, in the traditional toilets, of course, it's a much better position because obviously everything is upright.
Yes.
Let's leave that there.
Okay,
People are going, having breakfast this morning. I do want to ask you, is bog bum reserved for men?
Yeah,
Georgie says it is.
I think so.
Enjoy your cereal, won't you?
Yeah.
We'll take a break now. We'll go through more of Georgie's stories after this break. Bog bum. Yes, you said men spend more time on the loo than women. Well, apparently, according to Andy in Southsea, good morning. Yes, us fellas do spend more time on the lav. Women spend more time in the bath. True.
Yeah. Although we probably spend more time in public toilets than men.
It's cereal time.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. Georgie, I agree with you. It's definitely a man's thing. My partner takes his cell phone to the toilet to conduct his business and make business calls.
Oh, no. No, there's a level.
OK, this is Elliot. We've obviously hit a nerve here. As a guy, I can say I've never understood the thing about reading on the toilet. I go in to do what I need to do because there are nicer places to scroll or read. Perhaps these men don't have a garden shed.
Well, or just a sofa. Or a coffee shop, or...
Well, you don't want to do your business on a sofa. I see what you mean. OK, fine. Let's move on.
This conversation
yeah,
going?
sorry about this. It's very early, 6:50. Good morning. What is worrying you most at the moment? And that can be anything. It can be political, non-political, whatever. What is worrying you the most? 0344 499 1000. Good morning, David says. Good morning to you. Absolutely everything worries me about the Labour government, but what worries me most is when they're booted out after this term, the untold damage they would have done to this country. Also, there's one for you, actually, I saw. Can you get the delightful Georgie, who is this, Jackie, to explain Reeves' plan from her Mansion House speech to put our pensions into mega funds to release money for the government? I'm deeply concerned about this.
Yeah, I wouldn't be concerned necessarily.
Many people were saying it's a good thing to take it away from the councils and allow investment into bigger funds.
Yes, so the argument is you've got all of this money in these little pots, as it were. If you bring it all together, you can then use that money to invest in the UK and UK projects, right?
Infrastructure.
Which, you know, puts money to good use, etc., and it's something that we need to do because we don't really invest that much in the UK. However, naturally what people are worried about and what I'm worried about is anything that says government and pensions makes me come out in hives. So, you know, look, I don't think in principle it's a bad idea. You know, it's not like the government getting hold of your pension money and then spending it willy-nilly. It will, and also because you have the scale, you can invest in sort of bigger, better projects. Hopefully it will cut down on fees and those sorts of things. So it could be a good thing. It could invest in the UK and it could put money that's not really doing a lot in the UK to good use. However, like I say, let's see where this goes. Anything that says government makes me nervous.
Well, let's stay with Rachel Reeves, shall we? Because you've chosen a really funny story. Well, it's not funny if it wasn't so serious. Telegraph page 4. This is about Rachel Reeves. It seems Rachel Reeves has a loose relationship with the truth.
Yes, I mean... so this is related to... She's been accused of exaggerating the amount of time that she was at...
An economist.
The bank, an economist at the Bank of England, which is one of the things that, that has sort of been... She's sold, or has been sold about her, as someone with a bit of credibility. And let's be honest, we could do with that with our politicians. So, look, she has spent some time at the Bank of England. She says it's about a decade. She spoke to the Stylist magazine, but actually it sort of comes out that it's only 6 years that she spent there, and actually one of those was doing a master's.
Right.
So it's sort of...
So as an economist, she's 4 years out, so that's she's, what, 40% out of her prediction, maybe?
Yes, but you could argue if it was 6 years, she's rounding up. So, yes, that's 10. You can see that in a maths...
Rounding up?
But actually it was only 5 because she spent a year doing a master's. I mean, I think Robert Jenrick's saying that, you know, she's proven herself to be a compulsive liar. It's a bit harsh, but it did make me think how many times, not on CVs, but we do our own PR, don't we? We say a little bit, you know, a little bit more on this project than perhaps I really did.
And also her LinkedIn profile, which we spoke about yesterday, being changed as well. You know, we keep calling her Rachel from Accounts, which I think is very apt. Let's also talk about this story in the Mail. This is going to make people's blood boil. Page 17 of the Mail. This is about trans men. Trans men, is it, or trans women?
Well, it's people who can have children.
Right.
Physically.
Yes.
Have children.
OK, so trans men, I think this story is about IVF.
Yeah, trans men and lesbians. It's basically saying that trans men and lesbians will be fast-tracked IVF and given priority over heterosexual couples.
Why?
Now, the reason being is because as a heterosexual couple, you have to prove that you have been having relations for 2 years unsuccessfully before you can have NHS funding for IVF. Whereas if you are a trans man or you're a lesbian, it's sort of given that you could be trying to have relations for 2 years, but you will not get pregnant.
Right.
because lesbians can't get pregnant together. You're looking at me very confused.
No,
I feel like I need to spell this out to you.
I was just thinking it's very early in the morning, but...
Yes.
Yeah.
So you look, that's the argument, and they're saying that if you come and you say you're a trans man or a lesbian, that you will be fast-tracked, and that will mean that, you know, couples who are desperate to have children, obviously you can't smoke, and it will, you know, all those sorts of things, certain age group, etc. This is up to £5,000, and I know that you particularly have views as to whether this should be on the NHS anyway.
I mean, look, we're spending $200 billion on the NHS, and then you have to say, well, surely we should refine what our core services are. And then the question arises, well, does IVF fit into that? And we can have a conversation about that.
Well, to use my own experience, and I have had IVF, and I was living up in Yorkshire at the time, and that was significant because there's a sort of postcode lottery as to what you can get. So down south, where I live now, it's 35, but in Yorkshire it was 40. And I'd only been with my partner for about 9 months at the time, and then my GP said to me, well, if you want to have kids, you better hurry up, because you can get it for free on the... And I'm not saying that that was a bad thing. She was trying to help me, and I agree with that. That's lovely. But even as someone that's gone through the IVF process with my partner, then he left and I went through it on my own, right? I paid for it. It's very expensive. I still, and I wasn't successful, right? I don't have children, and that's very sad and something I'll have to think about for the rest of my life. Look, it's fine. I don't know that I would have made an amazing mother anyway. So
you would have done.
Thank you, Sid. But, you know, I wasn't successful. But even now, having gone through that whole process and knowing how much couples desperately want children, and also in this is if you are a stepmother and your partner's got children already, you are not allowed to have free IVF. I don't think it should be included on the NHS.
Neither do I.
Maybe subsidised if you can prove, or if you are young and you're infertile at a very young age, perhaps through cancer treatment.
Yes.
I think but I don't think it should be a blanket, everyone under 30, maybe a means tested or something. I know how desperately sad it is not to be able to have children. I know. And I still don't think this needs to be on the NHS. So whether trans men, lesbians, heterosexual couples, I sort of say all the same,